everybody, Terry here, D-lab, and I'd like to introduce to you my newest little series of guitar amps called the Super J. These are a Class A amplifier running a 6V6 output tube, and as you know, I make a lot of those. However, this one is quite unique. The input section utilizes a 6SJ7 tube. Then it goes through your typical Fender bass and treble controls. Then it's reamplified by a 6SF5 tube. And it makes this thing come alive. You'll think, man, I've never heard such a great full sounding Class A amp. This thing has a lot of chime and of course a lot of character because it's built in an old RCA 28X beautiful wood cabinet. So let's give it a look-see. As you can see, it pretty much just looks like a radio. However, when I flip it around, you'll see that it's not. Unfortunately, when I got it, the dial glass had a crack, which I've repaired. So now it kind of looks like the scar on Frankenstein's head, right? Little character. But at least the rest of the dial was in good shape, and I was able to maintain the old original backlighting. You can see the bulbs shining there on each side. Now here's what I really love. Take a look at this grill. They somehow made these wavy little wood slats. I don't know how they did it back in the day, but it's gorgeous. And this is wood, not bakelite, okay? Here's our controls lineup. Now I was able to utilize the original knobs. So this control, instead of being tone, is now volume. This one, which is volume, is now treble. This one is bass, which used to be the tuning. And then this one is our rotary power select. So the first position is off. The second position is standby. The third position is tube rectifier. The fourth position is a diode rectifier. Let's take a look around the back. So here we go. Backside tour of the D-lab Super J combo guitar amp. This thing started its life obviously as an RCA 28X radio. Okay. When I got it, of course, it didn't work, and as you saw, the dial glass was cracked, and there's a lot of smoke damage under the chassis from components that had blown up in its past, right? So it was a great candidate for a retrofit. So first thing I had to do was clear components out of the way that I was not going to use, and the next thing I had to do is get a power supply in it. So here is a new power transformer. Here's your output transformer. There's the original speaker, which I wanted to utilize again. It's in there on its original mount. Very cool. Tube lineup. Got a 6X5 rectifier, 6V6 output tube. The input tube is a 6SJ7. Then through the tone circuits it comes back and it's reamplified by the 6SF5. Okay? Here is where you plug in your guitar. Yeah, I had to put it on the back because there's no room on the front. Plus, this chassis sits back here a good inch off the front panel. So you'd never be able to plug in your guitar on the front anyway, right? Outputs for speakers. You got an 8 and 4 ohm. When there's no speaker plugged in, the internal speaker works. If you plug in either a 4 or 8, it automatically disconnects the speaker. Here's our fuse holder and of course AC line input. So back to the chassis of this retrofitted radio into guitar amp, there's a few things I wanted to point out. When I did the retrofit, I only used 4 tubes. There's actually spots in this thing for 8 tubes. Okay, so there are some unused tube positions. 2 here, and there's 2 back here behind the preamp tubes, alright? So to ensure that nobody could accidentally plug in a tube where it didn't belong, I used some nickels, and I glued them in there since they're the right diameter. Looks pretty cool. The other thing I needed to point out is when I wired this amp, obviously it's completely point-to-point wired, but what's really wild is I didn't have to land a single terminal board because I used the tube pins of the unused sockets as my landing pads. out of the center of one of the unused tube sockets, since it had the octal keyway and the hole that went all the way through. I used that to route the wires up for the speaker and for the old original dial amps. Here's the top side view. You see the old D-lab signature there. A couple nickels installed. There's that vintage speaker. Let me show you the face of that. Cool old paper cone 6x9, and you can see the distance from that to the chassis is quite a bit, so it would have been extremely tough to be able to install a front panel jack. The other thing that's really nice about this design, now keep in mind there's no choke in the power supply, but listen how quiet it is. This is full volume. Just a little bit of white hiss, which you would expect. There's no AC hum, no buzzes, snaps, pops, etc. This thing is super clean. Here's the bottom of the cabinet. I did add new feet since the old ones were pretty badly deteriorated. Here's the cool part though, look at there. The original RCA Super 8 specifications, they're little bullets of what this radio was. And there's the original sticker that was on the Model 28X with chassis layout. How cool is that? Vintage stuff at its best. So let's see what the little Super J amp sounds like in this vintage RCA 28X cabinet. This thing has a built-in 6x9 speaker. Very vintage. And it sounds great. So first off, we'll test it with a built-in speaker on tube rectifier mode. Then I'll switch to diode mode. And then we'll hook up this big extension cabinet underneath of it and see how well it drives a pair of Celestions. So here we are in tube mode. This D-lab doing an A chord. We'll do it again, eh? Alright. Now, I just flipped over to diode mode. Getting a little bit better at that. Now, let me hook up the big speaker. So the cabinet here has a pair of 12-inch Celestion 16 ohm speakers in it, wired in parallel. So we're going to take this plug and go to the 8 ohm out jack on the little Super J. And what's nice is when you plug this in, it disconnects the internal speaker. So now we're on the big Mambo Jumbo. Let's see what it sounds like. I have not touched any settings on the amplifier, but I did return it to the tube diode mode. So here's the first test run in the Celestions. Go diode mode. Try a different pickup. So eventually I'll get somebody over here who knows how to play, but this is just to show you that this amp sounds great with its internal speaker and it sounds super on the Celestions. So I'm very pleased with the outcome of this project for several reasons. One, I was able to keep this radio looking the way it did back in the day, but reconfigured it as a cool little combo amp so it has another life to live. Okay. The other thing was I wanted to maintain that original 6x9 speaker, and believe me, I had my fears. I thought, man, that thing's old and crusty and it's going to sound terrible. It sounds great. So bam, got lucky on that one, right? And the other thing was I wanted to reuse those original round bakelite knobs. So I had to do a little bit of machining to cut flats on the 1/4 inch round shafts of the new pots. But now the knobs slide right on. She looks the way she did, and it's the new D-lab Super J circuit. How cool is that? So I'd love to say you can find this D-lab amp at your high-end audio stores, but you can't. This is the only one I made. Unless I find some more of these cabinets, it's probably the one and only. However, the Super J circuit will be utilized in many upcoming D-lab amps. Hope you enjoyed the video.